Guys, Miss Zajac here. I teach fourth grade at Inskip Elementary School. Last week we talked about sectionalism and the abolitionist movement, and we briefly touched on the Underground Railroad. So today we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. We have a brain pop to watch. We're going to review what we talked about, last week, and then I'll go over the learning packet one pager from this week. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're talking about the Underground Railroad. Our review from last week was that the North and South started having big sectional differences. Those sectional differences were the ones that were local in the towns and the neighborhoods, but then remember they kind of spread out and became bigger problems for our country. One of these problems was that slavery was prohibited or not allowed in the North, but it was allowed in the South because they had a lot of farming, agriculture, and they needed the slaves to help them grow the crops. And so that was a big part of their economy, of how they made their money. Abolitionists wanted to end slavery because they believed that slavery was morally wrong, unjust, and against the Constitution. The Constitution said that every man was created equal, and so slavery went against this. Abolitionist leaders like Harriet Tubman began to secretly help slaves escape along the Underground Railroad, and we're going to pick up with that today.
Dear Tim and Moby, what can you tell me about the Underground Railroad? Your friend, Bo. Hey, Bo. The Underground Railroad wasn't a subway or anything like that. It was a network of escape routes and hideouts set up during the 19th century. African Americans used it to flee the slave-holding states of the South. The underground part meant that they traveled in complete secrecy. And railroad came from the code language they used in communications, like conductors for the people who helped runaways escape, passengers or baggage for those who were fleeing slavery, and stations for the homes and other places where they'd hide. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children escaped to freedom on the Underground Railroad. Most settled in northern states and Canada, while some went west or farther south. Life wasn't easy in a lot of these places. Runaways faced racism just about everywhere they settled, but they had gained their freedom. Some joined groups of abolitionists, people committed to ending slavery. The Quakers, a Christian organization, were some of the earliest abolitionists. One of their central beliefs is that all people are equal. I know, but back in the 1800s, that was a pretty radical idea. It took a broad range of people to get support for the abolitionist cause. Like Frederick Douglass, who'd escaped slavery as a young man. He wrote and spoke with passion about the cruelty of owning human beings. Sojourner Truth, once enslaved herself, was another fearless crusader. When someone threatened to burn down a hall where she was scheduled to talk, she replied, "Then I will speak upon the ashes." White abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison and Henry Ward Beecher were equally passionate. And religious groups besides the Quakers got involved too. All of these people worked tirelessly to end slavery and help runaways build new lives. As the abolitionist movement grew, the Underground Railroad picked up steam. Routes expanded, and new ones opened up heading to Mexico and the Caribbean. The path to freedom often meant going long distances by foot, carrying everything you owned. But people also had to stow away on boats, wagons, and trains. Whatever it took to escape a life of slavery. One man, Henry Box Brown, even shipped himself from Virginia to Pennsylvania. An abolitionist shop owner helped him hide in a wooden cargo box. He spent over a day inside before it was safely reopened in Philadelphia. The journey wasn't easy for anyone and could stretch over 1,000 miles. Passengers avoided main roads and traveled mostly at night. They often had to duck into swamps or forests to avoid being seen and captured. Those who helped them were also at risk. You could be thrown in jail for giving runaways food or shelter. Despite the danger, some folks took on even bigger roles in the Underground Railroad. They personally guided passengers between stations, taking them from one stop to the next. These were the railroad's conductors. The majority were African Americans already living freely in the North. Harriet Tubman is the most well known. She was born into slavery in Maryland, but escaped to Pennsylvania when she was a young woman. Tubman helped more than 100 people make it north. Another important conductor was William Still. He kept detailed records of the nearly 650 people he helped save. Still used these stories to publish a book about their experiences. That's one reason we know so much about the Underground Railroad. No, slave owners weren't too happy about losing the people they viewed as their property. They resented Northerners for interfering in their business, and were especially outraged at states that protected runaways. Federal regulations said that any escapees had to be returned. In the eyes of the law, they were like stolen property. But several states passed laws making it illegal to arrest them. Other states gave runaways the right to jury trials and free legal help. Often, juries would refuse to convict, and the men and women would go free. So Southerners pushed the federal government to pass the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. Anyone in law enforcement who didn't arrest a runaway would have to pay a big fine, and people who sheltered or helped them could be imprisoned. The law infuriated Northern abolitionists. Most continued to help African Americans make it to Canada, even though they now faced serious consequences. The slavery issue ripped the country apart, dividing North and South. In Kansas, the dispute spilled over into armed combat, and in 1861, the conflict finally exploded into the Civil War. You can learn more about that in our Civil War Causes movie. Okay, here's our train. You may want to stand aside. Because, that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Underground Railroad. Like we just saw, it wasn't really a railroad. Slaves used railroad codes to communicate in secret. So conductors were the people that helped the slaves escape, passengers were the slaves, and stations were the safe places that they could go. The Underground Railroad was a network of escape routes for slaves that they traveled along that were safe. They had to go long distances that said hundreds, thousands of miles, right, to escape slavery and to get free. And they could only take what they could carry. So it was very dangerous. They escaped during the night in order to be safer. But if they got caught, there was a lot of punishment and injury and sometimes even death. So it was a very scary thing, and they were risking a lot. They went north towards Canada or towards the free states. They went west, or they went further south, Mexico, the Caribbean, places where people were free. Abolitionist leaders like Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, William Lloyd Garrison, Harriet Tubman, those were some that we talked about last week. And this week they also added Henry Ward Beecher. So he's somebody that you can look into further if you are still interested. This is going to be your learning packet extension. So it is a map builder, and it shows the routes that the slaves took to go to safety. So I want you to go ahead and answer the questions 1 through 4 there. What areas did they escape from? Where did they go to? And then I want you to think about where we live in Tennessee and the part that we played at this time. And then in your own words, describe the patterns that you see in the map above. So what do you notice about where escaped slaves traveled to? Why do you think they went to those places? And then try to make some connections between the abolitionists that we talked about and the Underground Railroad. And then, of course, dig a little deeper with other resources. There were some in your packet from last week. And the story about Henry Box Brown, Henry's Freedom Box, is a great place, a great read aloud to do. And I hope that you enjoyed learning about this, and I will see you next time.